भारत विश्व का ऐसा देश जिसे पहचाना जाता है उसकी सभ्यता, संस्कृति और कला के लिए। उसी कला का एक नमूना है वास्तुकला यानी आर्किटेक्चर। ताजमहल, अजंता एलोरा केव्स, कोणार्क मंदिर, गेटवे ऑफ इंडिया, जामा मस्जिद जैसी कई प्रसिद्ध बिल्डिंग्स ने हमारे इस देश को विश्व में एक अलग पहचान दी है। यह एक ऐसी कला है जो सदियों से चलती आ रही है। क्या आप जानते हैं, हिंदू पुराण के अनुसार विश्वकर्मा को वास्तुकला का भगवान माना जाता है। उन्होंने कई देवी देवताओं के लिए बेहद खूबसूरत शहर और महल बनाए। उनकी कुछ लाजवाब कारीगरी है सतयुग में स्वर्ग, त्रेता युग में लंका और द्वापर युग में द्वारका। शायद यही वजह है कि आज भी हम किसी भी इमारत की नींव रखने से पहले भूमि पूजन करते हैं। इस दुनिया को मॉडर्न और बेहतर बनाने में आर्किटेक्चर फ्रेटर्निटी का बहुत बड़ा योगदान है। हमारे देश ने कई दिग्गज और प्रतिभाशाली आर्किटेक्ट्स की कला को देखा और सराहा। बीवी दोषी, चार्ल्स कोरिया, राज रेवाल जैसे कई दिग्गजों ने हमारे देश को मॉडर्न और फ्यूचरिस्टिक बनाने में अपना पूरा जीवन समर्पित किया और हमारे देश का नाम पूरे विश्व में रोशन कर दिया। इतना ही नहीं, बल्कि ले कॉर्बुज़िए, एडविन ल्यूटन्स, लुइस कान और लॉरी बेकर जैसे कई दिग्गज विदेशी आर्किटेक्ट्स को भी भारत में काम करने का मौका मिला। चलिए तो इन सभी की जिंदगी से प्रेरणा लेते हुए शुरू करते हैं एक नया सफर जिसका नाम है लेजेंड्स ऑफ डिजाइन।
नमस्कार, आदाब, सत श्री अकाल, केम छो? दोस्तों, मैं करण मेहता आप सभी का स्वागत करता हूं लेजेंड्स ऑफ डिजाइन के पहले एपिसोड में। लेजेंड्स ऑफ डिजाइन एक ऐसा शो है जो हमारे आर्किटेक्चर इंडस्ट्री के दिग्गजों की लाइफ को सेलिब्रेट करता है। हमारे आज के जो गेस्ट हैं, उन्होंने हमेशा से अपने काम में अपनी वैल्यूज को जिंदा रखा। मैंने हमेशा सुना था कि बी अ पीपल्स पर्सन, बट व्हेन आई मेट हिम आई केम टू नो दैट ही इज अ पीपल्स आर्किटेक्ट। तो आइए देखते हैं हमारे आज के इस गेस्ट की एक छोटी सी झलक।
I have a dream. I think about one day when everyone in this country will have lovable, livable, affordable, safe and secure shelter. That's my ultimate dream. Architecture actually never happens on a drawing board. It always happens at the site. Sustainability is not a worn-out word, especially for the world of architecture, because I believe that fraternity is playing a very important role if you are talking about keeping this world green and alive. Everything that you are going to build has to be built responsibility. It has to be morally right. I am Shankar. I belong to Habitat Technology Group, which is one of the largest NGO initiatives in the world.
So, ladies and gentlemen, may I now please call upon the living legend. He's been awarded the most prestigious Padmashree and more than 14 national awards by the Government of India. Let us all welcome him together, Dr. Gopal Nair Shankar. Shankar sir, I thank you very much from the bottom of my heart to be here with us today, and welcome to the show Legends of Design, and we are shooting our first episode with you. It's an honor to have you with us.
It's actually my pleasure and it's my privilege too.
Thank you, sir. So sir, let's begin the conversation. We have a lot of youngsters here with us, and sometime you're also probably their age. Can you just tell them how was your childhood like? Where were you born?
I was actually born and brought up in East Africa, where my father was actually working for the British government, and my mother was a Swahili teacher in Africa. I was there till my primary classes, and then I came back to Tiruvalla, which is my native place in Kerala, and I had the rest of the education there in Kerala. That was my school education. I have some memories about the African landscapes. Those days, the places where my father was working, places like Arusha, Morogoro, Zanzibar and Tanganyika together. Now they are two different countries, Tanzania and Zanzibar. My foster mother was an African lady who belonged to Maasai tribe. So
the famous
Maasai tribe, yeah. Yes. And the first language that I actually learned was not Malayalam, but the first language that I learned was Swahili, the language of my foster mother. I would actually call her as foster mother because she was the person actually who brought me up, because my mother was a busy teacher and all the daytime she was with me. I was a tiny toddler that time. And African landscape, I have very vivid memories about African landscape, wild animals coming to the courtyards, giraffes, zebras, the house, and my initial education was there. That was again something that I would cherish myself, because I was the only brown-skinned person in those classes. The rest of them are all blacks, and yeah, I mean, that's what I remember about Africa and my early childhood. After which, I came to Tiruvalla, I said, which is my mother's native place. And I had a problem there. I had a huge problem.
What was that?
Karen, I had bad stammering at that time, I couldn't speak well. Yes. I couldn't even complete one sentence because I had severe stammering at that time. And added to that was my basic language problem, in the sense my parents put me in a Malayalam medium school in Kerala. And I didn't know even the alphabets. I could understand Malayalam, but I didn't know the language. So I didn't know even the alphabets. I didn't know how to read and write. So those days, I still remember, we used to have somebody who would come to your house and take your fingers and write on the soil, Mother Earth. Okay. that is when I started feeling the Mother Earth, you know. Actually, the language, Malayalam, came to me through my fingers, you know.
Oh, interesting.
In a year's time, I could read books in the local language. That's how I started my language exercises, yeah.
So, there is an interesting story. When you were studying or you were being there in Africa, your father was working there, and then there was a time when you had to relocate to India. So, what was that incident?
Yeah, I mean, like when my father, I told you, he was in British government service, and the Britishers were leaving, you know. All these African countries were getting independence at that time. And being a British government official, my parents were given an option either to go to UK, which was actually dream openings in UK, but my father decided otherwise. He wanted to come back to India and start living here, you know. And that was a critical decision. Probably that led me into amazing vistas which I took later. And he was one person who was very patriotic at heart.
Correct.
And slowly this sense of patriotism probably got to me also. Correct. Even those days there was a land of, you know, opportunities. He would have, you know, he would have started living a probably better, secure life there, you know, in UK. Instead, he wanted to get back to the roots.
True.
This is very important, you know.
True.
Getting back to the roots is very important in each one of us life's journey, you know. Yeah.
That's good. So moving ahead, how were your college days? What was that moment when you decided that yes, I want to become an architect?
It was actually the result of an evolution that happened during my school days, you know. I started working for some social movements at a very, very young age, the age of 10. You know.
Age of 10?
Age of 10, you know. Those days, in those states, many things were happening. And I slowly got entangled in a social movement for popularizing science. We wanted science to reach out to the common man. So we had several activities linked to that. And one of the activities was to sell books, you know, demystify science and make it very simple. And we were actually telling people how technology and science could enhance their livelihood opportunities. And so we published small little booklets in our local language, and I started selling them to the, you know, households and things like that. And also, that time, when I was in the 6th standard, 7th standard, we used to sell a new innovative, this thing that we developed, you know, Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad developed. That was actually usage of smokeless chulas. So, you know, old days, you know, we used to take a lot of fuels, you know, wood as the basic fuel, and that used to emit a lot of toxic gases. So we used to get, those days, those who worked in the kitchen used to get lots of lung disorders because of the toxic gases. So we developed a chula which used minimum amount of fuel and take the same heat, you know. So that was the innovative to the households and sell it for a price. But the idea was to, you know, sort of sell technologies and science, basic sciences to the common man. So that actually led me to varying forays, and later I got entangled in another process, you know, talk about total literacy. Even now, after so many decades, I realize that one of the most deprived classes in our society is the traditional fisherman society. I had a great opportunity when I was right in the middle school to work with, sort of be with the most deprived, most marginalized. You know, what happened to that sector was the traditional fishermen lost their jobs because trawling came in, you know, mechanized boating came in, and they didn't have ways. So we want to empower them, you know, through literacy by teaching them. So at that age, you look at it, as in the 6th standard, 7th standard, we had to go to the fishermen's chalets, what we now call as chalets, huts, where the women folk would come after selling fish on the streets. They would come back home late in the evening with the scent of fish all over. They used to take a bath before they come to this thing. They used to cook a morsel of food which used to share. What they called a house, to me, it was not unacceptable. It was kind of unacceptable even at that age, because it didn't have toilets, it didn't have proper spaces for the ladies, no dignity, nothing. And then we used to sit together, and I used to teach them how to read and write. That is a huge exercise, actually, which when I go back in my memories, that actually showed I never knew that there's such poverty in our country, I belong to an upper middle class family.
Okay.
And the first time I was feeling poverty, and I was experiencing poverty, I was seeing a population without tomorrows. You see, I mean, these people don't have tomorrows. If the sea goes rough, they won't be able to go to the sea and catch fish.
That means hand to mouth.
I'm telling you, they didn't have even proper one meal a day, most deprived classes. And when I held their hands at that age, I thought, whatever I'm going to learn should be for these kind of people who form the majority of Indian population. And later, when the time of choice came to select my profession, I took architecture because I thought through architecture I can hold their hand and do some meaningful interventions in the sector. That's how I slowly turned to architecture. I did my architecture from the College of Engineering, Trivandrum, and those 4 days, I should tell you that this is actually the students. I had an excess of Renaissance architecture, Reformist architecture, excess of that. But to me, I wanted to learn about the legacy of Indian architecture, the legacy of Indian polity, which talked about 50,000 rupees, 5 adults to live, and no other means. India is a land of opportunities, but the poor people didn't have choices. I wanted my teachers to teach me about that, how to design houses in a small plot for a small budget for an average Indian family. That actually, instead of that, I was taught, I told you, an excess of Western architecture. The legacy of Indian architecture was never there in the syllabus. Times have changed now. Now they have these things about sustainable architecture, legacy of traditional vernacular architecture is there in the syllabus. Those days it was not there. But I was very sure about what I'd want to do in life. And then something very exciting happened. That also I share at this particular moment. There was a white man who was actually doing some forays into architecture. Actually, I met him just before I decided to become an architect, because I saw him at a place, at a house site, which this white man was designing and building a house for one of my classmates during pre-university period. I saw him at the site. And I still remember that moment when this white person, I didn't know what an architect meant at that time, white person who was doing that building was arguing with the owner of that house. This particular owner, that's my friend's father, he had 5 children, 5 brilliant children. And the mathematics professor, the father, he wanted a 6-bedroom house, 5 bedrooms each for the children and 1 bedroom for himself. The white person who was designing the house was actually through gestures. I still remember the gesture. He said, Mr. Nambudiri was the name of this thing. Your children will all fly away after some time. And finally, the old man and the old woman will be alone in this house. Will you be able to manage such a big house? 6-bedroom house? But the owner was very adamant. He said, it's my money, my children, I want to give them, each one of them a room. But he said, look, Dr. Nambudiri, your children are all brilliant. They're academically focused. After a few years, they will start flying away. And after a few years, after a decade, after I graduated in architecture, I had the opportunity to go back to that particular house. I'll tell that story a little later. But the white man who did that building was none other than Laurie Baker.
Oh.
Laurie Baker, you know, the British architect who shed actually light into the. Then during the age of when I was a student of architecture, I thought what he was doing was right. But I didn't stop there. After my graduation, I actually went to Birmingham to do my master's in architecture. And later I had the opportunity to work with one of the top-notch, I don't want to reveal the names, but top-notch architects in India. And I realized that he was one person where there was no gap between the word and the deed. He was the man. Laurie Baker was the word, he was the man. There was no conflict between the word and the deed. And his buildings were happening all around me in Trivandrum, where I came from. And I realized that here is the right direction. I never worked with him. People think that I worked with him for a long time. I never worked with him. I probably learned, like Dronacharya, you remember, like the old story of Ekalavya. He was the Dronacharya to me. Through his buildings, he inspired me, through his buildings. I never worked with him. I just barely knew him. And later, even now, let me tell you this, his buildings continue to inspire me. For an architect, each day is a crisis. Whenever I go tired, whenever I'm in a fix, I still go to, at my age, mind you, I go to a Baker building to get charged again because his way of handling spaces, deft way of looking at the vocabulary of building materials, they still intoxicate me, I'm telling you. They still can not only try to motivate me and inspire me and hold my hand, they continue to intoxicate me, That's the word that I want to use, yeah.